Alright, let me switch. Because I got hotkeys now, so let me switch. Looking at the camera and clicking. Let's go. The rise and fall of controller players in Fortnite. Now, me personally, I like playing Fortnite. You know what I'm saying? I like the game a lot, so let's just tap in. Let's see how this goes, man. Yeah, family. For me.
Controller players had no business competing with anybody using a keyboard and mouse. But 2 years after the game's release, they were completely terrorizing the competitive scene. At one point, 85% of players in every major tournament played on controller, but today that number has plummeted to under 10%. So how does a group that makes up 3/4 of the entire player base struggle to compete at the highest level? This is the rise and fall of controller players in Fortnite. In the early days of Fortnite, if you played on PC, you would be using a mouse and keyboard, and if you played on console, you'd be using a controller. Because of this, everybody just agreed that KBM players were way better than controller players because PC is better than console. So if you played controller, you only played against other controller players, and the same thing went with mouse and keyboard. The two most important things in Fortnite are having good aim and being good at building. This is where keyboard and mouse really had an advantage. It is much easier to aim using a mouse because you have your whole arm compared to a controller where all you have is a tiny plastic stick to move around with your thumb. Luckily, controller players had aim assist to make up for this, but it wasn't really that strong. Building on keyboard was also way easier than controller because
he's lying,
to
bro.
make up for this, but it was.
Look, he said it wasn't really that strong. Everybody analyze this. Bro, look, it wasn't really that strong, by the way.
Wasn't really
boom.
That strong.
Boom. With no try. Oh, never mind. That's Aiden.
Wrong. Building.
Hey, those who know, man. That dude was a demon. I'm not even gonna lie. Yeah, that is valid. He could have done that with no aim assist. I'm not even gonna lie.
On keyboard was also way easier than controller because there are so many buttons you have to press. For the first few months after the game's release, controller players had to scroll through each build and press so many buttons in order to do something that only took one button press on a keyboard. Overall, playing on controller put you at a massive disadvantage until the Builder Pro setting was released in January of 2018. Builder Pro made building on controller similar to mouse and keyboard. You press one button to switch to your builds, then another one to instantly place a build piece, and use the same bind to switch back to your guns. This caused a massive jump to the skill level of all controller players. Although this was a massive improvement, KBM was still the better input to play on.
Get up on out my face, brother. Twitch, by the way, head ass. Get up on out of here, brother.
And in September of 2018, Fortnite announced one of the most revolutionary things in gaming history: crossplay between PC and console. This was the first time ever where console and PC players would be matched in the same lobby. Once this happened, console players realized that they could just play on PC by plugging in their controller. Instead of playing on a console where they are capped at 60 FPS, they could now play on PC and have higher FPS with much less input delay. With the increased performance, they were slowly getting closer and closer to mouse and keyboard players. On top of this, a few months after the crossplay update, something massive was discovered. A controller player named Upshaw was messing around with his settings one day and realized that his aim assist was much stronger when he had higher FPS.
140 FPS, right? That's our frame rate limit. I've got a good computer, we're playing on low settings, so we should be hitting that no problem. Here's my buddy over here. So you can see the aim assist snap-on occurs really far away, so when I'm like about a couple feet away,
what the heck?
I can snap right into his head.
People said, yo, they got aim assist, they're hacking. I thought they was lying. Oh, this is real cheats.
We just about a couple feet away.
Hold on. Yo, up the res on my video. Never mind, the video just sucks. Can I do this in 4K? Like, come on, bro. Shitty ass video. Anyways,
Hey,
look.
I can snap right
He just clicked
into his head.
He's way like away from this dude, and look.
We just a single touch.
Oh my god, bro. I wish I played during this era. I wish I played during this era of Fortnite. I would have been. Hold on, y'all boys. Hold on. They're right ass here. Just chill. Just chill. Just chill. Boys just gonna get an empty chair now. I don't got no break scene. We'll do that. We'll do that next time. Trust. Just chill. 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 Alright, y'all, we got these. No lie, my food smell good. Y'all finna be hearing L reacts this whole time. Let me eat.
On L2. Now see what happens when I turn it all the way down to
down to 30 FPS and had little to no aim assist, but as he raised it higher and higher, it became stronger and stronger. This discovery would cause every controller player who took the game seriously to switch to PC immediately. Shortly after this discovery was the beginning of L2 spamming. Whenever you aim down sights, the aim assist would basically lock onto the player you're looking at, and this meant that constantly aiming in and out meant you would have robot-like aim. One of the first players to master L2 spamming was Aiden. He first blew up by competing at Fortnite's summer skirmish that took place at PAX West in 2018. At the time, Nick Merckx was considered to be one of the best controller players in the game, and Aiden planned on contesting him at this tournament. And he went on to do just that.
Game or two, it doesn't spell the end. Is this Nick versus Aiden? Is this Nick versus Aiden? Shots to Nick Merckx goes down. Aiden gets him too much inside here. He's got to go for it. And here we go, 93.
He switched to the wrong gun.
Aiden catches him off guard.
Nick switched to the wrong gun.
Are you kidding me?
He absolutely dominated Nick Merckx, making him the new best controller player. If you look at the leaderboard from this tournament, everybody but maybe 5 people played on a keyboard and mouse, but this was a turning point because controller players realized that they could compete. Starting in 2019, Fortnite began hosting tons of open tournaments, meaning anybody could play. Speaking of tournaments that anybody can compete in, Playground.gg is hosting a $10,000 tournament. Assist was controller players.
Being a cadet in Starfleet Academy means being open to the people around you.
Players did not perform well at all. In fact, out of the 100 players who qualified for World Cup solos, only 7 played controller, and only 2 of the 100 players in duos were controller players. Considering around 75% of all Fortnite players use a controller, you would think more of them would be able to qualify. While Wolfies did manage to place second in duos, the best placement in solos was 33rd by Letchi, so the leaderboards were dominated by keyboard and mouse. So what happened that suddenly made controller players so good? Well, at the beginning of Chapter 2, new sensitivity settings were released. This made Fortnite on controller much more customizable, so everybody was able to build and aim better. One of the best players after this update was Unknown Army.
Jealous?
I'm such a controller player! Yo, I just triple headshot him!
He's dead.
Oh my god!
Unknown completely mastered aiming on top of piece control, and it showed in his placements. He won FNCS in Chapter 2 Season 1 and also managed to win 6 solo cash cups along with a couple duo cash cups. There was a huge shift on every tournament leaderboard this season, as time and time again there were more controller players earning than mouse and keyboard. While players like Unknown were using the legacy aim assist settings, which made L2 spamming broken, other controller players started to switch to linear. The thing is, everybody thought legacy aim assist was the real issue because of how overpowered Unknown made it seem. This single-handedly caused Epic Games to remove it, and everybody finally thought they nerfed controller into the ground, but little did they know it just got even better. Since everyone was so distracted by clips of players getting destroyed by L2 spamming, nobody realized that the new linear settings were even better. It was strong while aiming down sights, but the hipfire was basically aimbot. This meant that the new meta of fighting on controller was to jump in a box and 50-50. Most players wouldn't even carry a shotgun because carrying an AR and SMG was a better option.
Either double scar or single scar. Or an SMG. No shotgun allowed. I don't care.
This caused tournaments to be dominated by controller players, especially the solo FNCS Invitational, where 75% of all players that qualified were using one. In the same season, Epic Whale, who was one of the best KBM players on NA West, decided to switch to controller and won an FNCS by doing so. Once this season ended, Fortnite obviously knew something needed to change, so they nerfed the strength of aim assist by about 30%. This would be reflected pretty quickly just by looking at the leaderboards, because most controller players relied on the overpowered aim assist instead of actual talent. As a lot of players started to fall off, a few players were bursting onto the scene. 2 of them were Day and Marrow. With the game mode being trios for all of 2021, playing with good fighters was a necessity, and Day and Marrow were 2 of the best. Along with Reverse 2K, they managed to win 2 FNCSs during a time where controller players didn't have much representation on the leaderboards. The main reason for this is because most trios didn't want to have more than one controller player because it was much harder for them to get long range damage. In the entirety of 2021, there wasn't a single FNCS final with more than 20 controller players, and most of them had around 10 to 15. Although the best trio in the game had 2 controller players, most of them had 1 or 0. Luckily, Chapter 3 would change the game mode to duo, so this wasn't as big of an issue. Chapter 3 Season 1 also had one of the best metas ever for controller. The Stinger SMG was so broken and shotguns were so weak that barely anybody carried one. Close range tracking is much easier on controller than it is on keyboard and mouse, so with a spray heavy meta, this benefited controller players a ton. But somehow, even with the best case scenario, only 24 controller players managed to qualify for Grand Finals. Of course, Mero would go on to win FNCS with Bugha, but most of the other controller players finished in the bottom half. After this, everything started to go downhill, and this was the last time we would ever see more than 20 controller players in a major tournament final. This is because of 3 main reasons. First is aim assist bugs. Chapter 3 and 4 had tons of issues where you would just randomly lose aim assist for an entire game. This might not seem like a huge deal, but aiming without aim assist is very difficult, and when you're in a lobby with the best of the best, you need it to perform. Second is the addition of scoped weapons. Weapons with scopes have very little aim assist, which makes it hard for controller players to get long-range storm surge tags. This means KBM players have a huge advantage, and since scoped weapons are still the norm in Fortnite today, it is a big reason why they dominate stacked lobbies. The third reason is the box fighting meta. With the entire game revolving around box fighting, most players on KBM nowadays are too far ahead mechanically to the point where controller players cannot keep up. Box fighting on KBM has always been way easier than controller because you can be much quicker with your movements and make more plays overall. And going into Chapter 4, this trend would continue with only about 15 to 20 controller players in each season's grand final. And going into the global championships in Copenhagen, only 9 of the 100 players who qualified for grand finals were on a controller. Of course, Mero won this tournament too. He doesn't even count. In under 3 years, we went from 70 plus controller players in every major tournament finals to under 10. You might be wondering if it's possible to ever see controller as the superior input, and the answer is no. Even if aim assist was buffed back to the strength it was in early Chapter 2, the game has just advanced to a point mechanically where good players would be able to counter it. If you think about how good the average player was in 2020 compared to now, it is a massive difference. Do I want them to buff aim assist? No. But do I think it would be interesting to see if it could help controller players compete at a higher level? Maybe. If you enjoy videos like this, please subscribe because I want to complete my childhood dream of getting a YouTube plaque, and if you want to watch another video like this, check out the evolution of mechanics.
Do you know Hobby Lobby has hundreds of incredible products on sale every single week? Just check out our weekly ad to discover unbelievable savings across the store and start shopping in-store or online at hobbylobby.com today.
W reacts, man. W reacts. All right. See y'all, boys.